Today we have a really interesting event that we haven't really done before, and that's where we hear from leaders on this campus and hear about their journey to where they got to how they got to the positions they've earned at this college, and how they navigate through those experiences, and how the demands on their career intersect with their identities and who they are here in the workplace and at home. And so we're going to have, I hope, a free-floating conversation about their journey from when they were young. Well, we're all still young, I think.
I haven't grown up yet.
As they remain young, and how they navigate that journey. So we're going to talk about that. And I have to say, sort of the sub-theme of this is becoming a leader. These are leaders on our campus. This is a large campus, as you know. And when I was a younger person, like last week, I thought about, there was a part of me when I was younger that wanted, for example, to be a journalist. I thought I was going to do that. I'm really glad I ended up a history teacher, but I would see successful people in that field, and I had no idea how they got to that point. And it was very challenging and daunting to me because I just didn't know what are the steps, what are the processes. And it seemed like insurmountable that I could ever become the kind of journalist that I thought they were. And so that's kind of, I think, sort of one of the themes I want to get at is what are some of the steps that young people can take to get to where their aspirations take them. So with that, I want to, again, thank you for all being here. I want to thank our panelists for being here. I'm going to go over their biographies a little bit and read those, and then we'll kind of dive into our questions. As always, though, this is your session. So if something's interesting to you and you want to shout out a question, shout out a question. We have folks on the stream. We're streaming on Facebook. We're streaming on Zoom. So if we have any questions from there, you'll let us know. And before we begin, I want to once again thank all of you for being here. But I lastly want to thank our fantastic team at International Services and Programs, John Garzon. They're great. Everything that happens at ISP, and especially everything that happens during this International Forum on Youth, is a byproduct of their hard work. And I just can't thank you enough. You guys are the best. So thank you again. Lastly, I'll stop doing this. Today we're talking about becoming a leader and hearing from our executive cabinet members. Tomorrow we're going to go in a totally different direction. It's a You Are What You Eat event. We're going to be over in the Sustainability Center, right in the cafeteria there. More food to come if you're there for that. And that is at 12:30 to 2 p.m. Yeah, you told me. And then Thursday is our concluding event. We always like to finish this with a student panel where we hear from you. And that is just down the hall in Mentry 343. That's at 2 p.m. And again, that's our student panel where we hear from all of our students in terms of challenges and opportunities and all kinds of good stuff. And I always love to conclude a week of these events with that. So hope to see you not only today, but hope to see you tomorrow for some food talk. And that's going to be kind of a cool conversation about culture and identity and the way food can kind of bridge divides. And then Thursdays are food. So with that, I want to introduce our panelists, and thanks again for being here. I'll start with Jasmine Ruys. Jasmine Ruys fell in love with education while studying for her bachelor's in history at California Lutheran University. Her passion for higher education led her to complete her master's degree in educational counseling and her doctorate in organizational leadership from the University of Laverne. Dr. Ruys has been with College of the Canyon since 2001. She has been a student services manager for 17 years, overseeing all areas of student services across the district. Dr. Ruys has held many positions with the college, including student services specialist, administrative assistant, director of admissions and records, Dean of Enrollment Services, Associate Vice President of Enrollment Services, and as of January 2021, the Assistant Superintendent Vice President of Student Services. Dr. Ruys has a strong background in enrollment services, leading the effort to bring student services fully online during the pandemic, opening the Intercultural Center, ensuring student services is responsive to statewide mandates, and the new framework of guided pathways. Dr. Ruys believes it is the responsibility of the Vice President of Student Services to eliminate barriers and implement equity-minded leadership for the college. Jasmine raises her 2 children in Santa Clarita with her husband, Steve, athletic director and faculty member in kinesiology at Los Angeles Mission College. Together, they are the proud parents of 2 beautiful children, Sophia and Zero, Hart District students, their faithful canine companions, Roxy, Timber, and Scooby. I'm not the happy family. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yes. Rian Medlin, Dr. Rian Medlin received her bachelor's degree in art history from San Diego State University, her master's in political science from Cal State Northridge, and a doctorate in organizational change and leadership from the University of Southern California. Additionally, Dr. Medlin has 18 years of human resources experience in community colleges and four-year universities. This has provided her with a well-rounded firsthand knowledge of all major human resource functions and progressively responsible roles. In 2005, she started as front office support with the Office of Faculty Affairs at Cal State Northridge, later becoming a compensation analyst with Cal State Northridge, to then promoted within the CSU system to an associate director of academic employee relations, and then director of faculty personnel with Cal State Channel Islands. In 2014, Dr. Medlin had the opportunity to work in her home community at College of the Canyons. Born and raised here in Santa Clarita, College of the Canyons has been a part of her identity growing up in the Valley, from taking swim lessons as a toddler in the college pool to taking her first college courses in high school through summer programs. She started at College of the Canyons in human resources as a senior HR generalist. Later, Dr. Medlin was promoted to HR manager, overseeing safety and workers' compensation programs, as well as the job classification structure. Then she was reclassified to the director of recruitment and employee services, supervising the staff, supporting labor and employee relations, as well as human resource programs. Since April of 2021, she has been in the role of interim assistant superintendent vice president, human resources, with a growing staff to support the college's need. In June 2023, she became the permanent assistant superintendent vice president of human resources through the college's competitive recruitment process. Thank you for joining us. And just as a side note, you can tell from these bios that this is a journey. This goes through many different steps to get to where we are. And I think that's part of our theme today. Last, but certainly not least, Dr. Omar Torres has proudly spent the last 22 years in higher education as part of the California Community College system. He currently serves as the Assistant Superintendent Vice President of Instruction at COC. He is a board member of the CIO organization, led the statewide training for deans of color and allies that aspire to become chief instructional officers, and participates on multiple other boards, including the college's foundation board, Gateway SCV Adult Education Consortium, and the Valley Industry Association. Statewide, Dr. Torres serves on the California Community Colleges Curriculum Committee, the Community College League of California, Advisory Committee on Legislation, and on numerous task forces. Prior to becoming CIO at College of the Canyons, he served as Associate Vice President of Instruction, the Dean of Mathematics, Sciences, and Engineering, and the Dean of Health Professions and Public Safety. He also had the opportunity to work at Santa Ana College as the Vice President of Academic Affairs. Before becoming an administrator, Dr. Torres was at Moorpark College for 6 years as a full-time faculty member in chemistry, teaching both on-site and online while serving as department chair for the Chemistry, Earth, and Environmental Sciences Department, as well as member of the college's Academic Senate and Curriculum Committee. He began his career at Los Angeles City College as an adjunct instructor in chemistry. Before entering the field of higher education, Dr. Torres also worked in research and development at the Dow Chemical Company in Freeport, Texas. Dr. Torres received his bachelor's degree in chemistry from Texas A&M University, a master's degree in chemistry from the University of California, Los Angeles, and an EDD in organizational leadership from the University of Laverne. He is also an internationally published co-author for 2 best-selling textbooks on general, organic, and biochemistry, as well as introductory to physical science. Let's get started. We're going to ask some questions, and I want to hear from each of you as we walk through these. But as I said earlier, if you have questions, jump in. We want to hear from you as well. So I'll start with you, Dr. Ruys. Where did you start when you graduated from college and began your professional journey? What was your first sort of entry point into your professional life?
So I had many jobs before I actually made it to College of the Canyons. And I wouldn't call it a professional life, but it was. I was a waitress for many years. And I was also working for a temp agency doing payroll for all of the temps. But it wasn't my passion. It wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't what I liked to do. Originally, I wanted to become a high school history teacher. That was what I was going to go get my master's degree in, was history, and getting my teaching credentials so that I could do that. And then I sat and did my hours for my teaching credential and realized I didn't want to do that either. So my mother found a job posting for College of the Canyons in LA Times. And that's how I applied here. And I started out as a classified worker in the student development office. And my job was to take minutes for ASG and to make sure that their agendas were posted on time and that they were following the Brown Act, and bringing vendors onto campus to be able to sell their stuff. So that was kind of my entry point into education. I knew I wanted to be in education because I wanted to be the high school history teacher. I wanted to be able to be there for students. I absolutely loved it in college. I was in student government in college, and I thought, if I could do this the rest of my life, that's what I want to do. But I didn't know it was a job. And so when I got the job here at College of the Canyons, I thought, this is perfect. I love the community college system. I love the mission, and I want to do this. So that's how education came to me.
And it's interesting too, I relate to what you're saying. I worked in a restaurant too, and I think at the time, I probably didn't think that had anything to do with the journey I
Right.
was on.
Right.
But you really are
It
acquiring
really
skills,
is.
relationship building, and strategies you're gonna use.
100%. Every single job that we have ever held, and I'm sure I'm speaking for them too, built those skills necessary to get where we are. There is not a job that doesn't teach you something that you're going to use.
Completely. Thank you. Dr. Medlin, same question to you. Where did you start your journey? And when you graduated, and what was your entry point?
So for me, I always felt really comfortable on a college campus. I went to San Diego State University, and while I was there, one of the, as we know, a great retention tool for students is to be able to work on campus. That was me. I worked in our cashier office, where we actually took like paper checks for tuition at the time, and I worked doing that. And then I also worked in our dorms. I was a resident advisor, as well as I worked the front desk to check people in and do rentals and things like that for equipment. And I really liked that environment. I always felt really at home at a college campus. I was studying to be an art historian. I had great dreams of working for the Getty and being a curator. And then, you know, kind of going on and working through that, but I kept coming back to working on a college campus. Once I had graduated from San Diego State, I knew I didn't want to stay living in San Diego. All of my family was in Los Angeles County. So I relocated back to Santa Clarita to be closer to my family, and had applied to the Pasadena Art and Design Center to get my master's degree, and was looking for on-campus jobs and wasn't able to find one, but I was able to find one at CSUN. And so I had applied for a part-time position in their faculty personnel office to be a receptionist, and was hoping to do that while I was getting my master's degree, and really loved it there too. I had worked for somebody that was a trained lawyer, and they were interested in training me as a paralegal and doing personnel. And that was an education that I didn't know I wanted until it was offered to me. But I thought that it really suited my personality, and being in the law field and working through conflicts. And so that kind of made me make a choice between, did I want to continue to pursuing art history and becoming a curator, or did I want to pivot and continue to work with the college? And I just love the university setting and higher education, that it was that entry point of, I had my mind kind of set up for so long that I wanted to do this thing, and I was pursuing that actively, to then be attracted by another field completely. Human resources and art history are about as far apart as you can get, but to have it be like, oh, this really fits what I'm good at. I'm really good at problem solving. I'm really good at conflict resolution, and doing this and training as a paralegal really spoke to that. And so I ended up changing and getting my master's in political science. I started doing a lot of advocacy work at the college with the students, but also started supporting the tenure process in my job for the faculty at CSUN. And the two things just really started to kind of mesh, and I just went with it. Wherever it took me, I decided that I was going to jump at the chance to take whatever the next step was. And that took me all through the Cal State system back to College of the Canyons.
It's interesting, both of your comments are striking to me, because it doesn't sound like doors were necessarily closed on you in the world of history or art history.
Oh, no.
You just found other doors opening up as you got further into this path.
It's true. And it's actually interesting because it has come full circle in a way for me. I just applied to be in a history master's program. So I've already gone through my journey as far as education is considered. I've done my doctorate, and I'm done for my profession, but I still want to be that person, maybe just in a different way than I
Right.
thought I could have been. I'm not interested in being a curator. I'd love to do some research, maybe write a few nonfiction,
Mhm.
some books, or maybe even fiction, historical fiction novels, but that's becomes more of a passion project
Right.
than my profession. So I didn't leave it behind, but there was something else that really suited my personality and I went with it.
Yeah, and that's a growth mindset, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you just never stop learning and never stop that love of learning. I think that's why a lot of us are
Exactly.
here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Dr. Torres, same to you. Where did you start your journey? What was your entry point into this
Well,
world?
I appreciate the story of my colleagues. Mine's a little different. Right when I got out of college, when I graduated from UCLA in 2001, 2002, that era, I started teaching high school chemistry. And I taught at a private school for a couple of years. And I really enjoyed it, believe it or not. I think sometimes dealing with the private school student mentality, the parents, the involvement, the helicopter parents and whatnot, it didn't really bother me. I enjoyed teaching students in general, and there really wasn't anything at the California Community College system at the time in SoCal, because I wanted to stay in SoCal for full-time employment. And so I did teach as an adjunct at Los Angeles City College, as Dr. Riffle mentioned briefly, while I was teaching full-time in high school. And so it was nice because I got to teach advanced placement and honors chemistry. The students, I almost said kids. The students were, I feel like they were my kids, were highly motivated, stimulated. They did really well on the AP exams. I did that for a couple of years. And it wasn't until I was at Los Angeles City College that I had some of the experience working as an adjunct, helping the department, supporting the department in what some of the role and the work that the full-timers do, but as an adjunct. And eventually I had a tap on the shoulder from my department chair, and he said, well, ironically, there's a full-time position in chemistry opening up at Moore Park College. And he goes, I think you should apply for it. I said, well, I'm really enjoying what I'm doing here, working with high school students, and they're doing well in the AP exams and the honors kids. I'm getting them ready for AP next year. And I really wasn't sure that I wanted to move, from that comfort zone area. And that was key, as I realized that even though that was my comfort zone, I also felt that I realized slowly that there were probably other things that I should probably force myself to try to undertake. And so I applied, and I went in with very low expectations. I thought, well, gosh, it's my first time applying for a community college job. I don't know if I'm going to necessarily be ready for the position. My colleagues at LA City College coached me on the types of questions that they would probably ask. But, one never knows, because every institution is different. The culture is different. And you never know what it is exactly that they're looking for. Even if you make it to finals, there's the first level, which is technical, sitting next to HR. And then the final level, which is really in many times in higher ed based on fit. And so I just went for it and thought, whatever happens, happens. And fortunately, they offered me the job, and I started my teaching career at Moore Park College. And so I continued that for many years, and I'm sure we'll talk about the rest later on.
So I relate to this as well, because when the first time I ever stood in a classroom and spoke to students, I was dehydrated from the sweat that was pouring out of my tummy and fear. So you made a bit of a leap too, I think, to jump into this profession. How do you, and I throw this out to any of you, but how do you overcome that initial fear to make that leap? I mean, maybe you call it imposter syndrome, or maybe you call it fear of failure. But do you remember any of the things that were the strategies that you developed to sort of overcome that? Because every time you make these career changes, you're taking another leap into the deep end of the pool, so to speak. So is there any thought on what you do in that response?
Yeah, again, my situation, I feel, was unique because I've never run away from a challenge. That's just my personality. And so when I was challenged by my colleagues at LA City College, well, we think you can do this. Well, what do you think? And you'd be chicken if you didn't go for it. And of course, when those words are told, it's like, okay, it's on. And so I don't know that I suffered from that, Brent, but Dr. Riffle, but I will say though that once I was awarded approved by the board and awarded the opportunity to serve in the full-time capacity, I did have those nerves. I will never forget my first day before I walked into the large lecture hall, because at the time I taught a double section of chemistry where you have a large lecture and then they split up into smaller labs because of the safety and the fire code. And so I remember taking that deep breath before I walked into the room. And then of course you've got all the eyes staring at you. And for a brief moment, I did have a little bit probably of imposter syndrome, but then I realized, you know what? I've taught high school, and if I can survive high school, I can survive anything. Yeah, mind you, they were private school, a little bit more well-behaved. But in general, high school students can have a reputation. I'll leave it at that. So I just figured if I can handle that, I should be able to handle community college. And, I look back and not a regret.
I think that's good advice too. Just you rely on what you've done already, right?
Mhm.
Rely on some of the things you've learned already.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff. All right. This is a more nuanced question. I'll turn back to you first.
Okay.
How do you think your sense of identity and who you are as a person help you today in your career, help you get to where you are?
I think that's such a great question. Trying to figure out who you are is one of the biggest human struggles, I
Mhm.
think, that anybody goes through. Because once you figure it out, I feel like you've almost changed and your foundation kind of stays solid forever, right?
Mhm.
You have morals and values that you really trust and understand going forward, but you change throughout your life to be able to focus on new items. But learning that value system, learning what it is that makes you as a person, and then reconciling that with the job that you're doing, I think is a really a foundation to be able to get rid of that imposter syndrome, to be able to overcome those different fears that you may have. Because if you can build your foundation on it, then when you're making those hard decisions in your jobs, when you're making the choices of what you have to do, your answers come easier because you're not going to rock your foundation. You know what you have set yourself up to be. For me, I have a foundation of a love of family. I will work to the ends of the earth for my family. That is one of my value systems, is ensuring that they are taken care of. I also really believe in education. I believe every single person should have access to an education. And those two core values make it really easy for me to make decisions in my life.
Mhm.
Is it going to interrupt my family? Is it going to hurt my family in any way? Is this going to provide education to somebody? Is this going to be able to open it up? Now, I have a lot of other values, but for this purpose, those two kind of subtle discussions
Pillars of your.
here, especially, that I can fall back to. Because if there is something that has happened on this campus that my staff come to me or students come to me and they say, well, this is the problem, you need to solve it, and they lay it on your desk, I can lean back to my values, who I am and what I believe in, to be able to make that decision and have a really good understanding and confidence in my decision because of that structure. And of course, we have also looked to laws that we have to do and we have to follow. But you as a person, when it's really ambiguous in law, when it's not something you guys have ever faced before, if you fall to your values and your identity, makes it really easy to make that choice. Because then I could live with myself. I could at least go home at night and sleep and go, you know what, though? I did the right thing because this is what I believe in. And I think that when you're early on in your career, you're trying to figure that out, trying to figure out what is that value system that I'm going to rely on. And every single one of those jobs, every single one of those choices you make, help build that to make that determination going forward.
And I think I love that. I think if you have those pillars of identity to rely on in times of threats too.
100%.
In times of fatigue, right?
Yep.
When I'm not at my top tip.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that's really valuable. Dr. Medlin, your thoughts on this in terms of your identity and are there specific sort of pillars like she's talking about, or other things that sort of define you as a professional?
I think so. I mean, I from my pillars, I think family is always one that I rely on too, is the what am I doing this for? I'm doing it. It's not just for me, but it's the reflection of me and my children. It's a reflection of me and my family. And, kind of making them proud, is something that I think about in my day-to-day work. Am I doing something that my daughter would approve of, kind of a thing, or my father or something like that? And am I living that spirit, but also in, who I know I am as a person, which I think, maybe luckily, maybe not so much. I think I knew that pretty early on in life, like this is who I am, but now it's just making sure that that the world is going to be okay with that. I think is more the other side of the identity struggle, is when you do know exactly who you are. but then being able to represent yourself authentically in the world. And I think for me, I was always a very direct person. I've always been a cut to the chase individual, but I've also always been a rule follower. That has been something I've been able to look back in every stage of life to know that I've always been a person that if you say this is where the line is, I'm going to hold you to it. And when you work in a legal field or when you work in human resources, that's a natural, it's also a comfort zone to be able to fall back on, is that this is the law. These are the rules, and I can operate within that, and I can also operate through it. So it also provides a level of creativity as well to say, well, these are our boundaries. We can work within these walls. What do you want to do? And it, you know, for employment, or if it's helping people navigate through their own career stages, to be able to use what I am comfortable with, which is where the lines are, and to be able to navigate that way. So I think that value system of kind of knowing who I am and where my comfort zone is does help me navigate the things that are uncomfortable for other people.
You're talking about your pillars, so to speak, right? So your directness, your candor, and then this sense of sort of right and wrong, what the rules are.
Right.
Is it important to you or any of you to sort of broadcast that identity or let people know, or is it a more personal sense? In other words, is it necessary for you to let your team know,
Right.
these are my values, this is my identity?
In some cases, yes. And I think, you know, for the operation that I run, it's important for people to know from the top what you're going to expect from me. Especially in dealing with difficult situations or in dealing with people that have done things that are wrong. A lot of what human resources does, besides the hiring aspect, is deal with people that have fallen outside of the rules.
Right.
But to be able to be fair and equitable in doing that, they know very clearly from the moment they walk in the door what they're going to get from me, what they have a right to expect from me in this situation. And I do think that it's important to broadcast that, because it's not, I'm not trying to, you know, have anybody fall into a trap.
Right.
You know, these are the rules, are clearly stated. You were told what they were. This is where we are today. Or if they're coming to me with a problem and they're trying to navigate it with their supervisor, they're trying to navigate it with their coworkers, to be able to very clearly broadcast what I can do for them. And I think that directness helps with a lot of it relieves anxiety in them. They know what to expect, but it also provides a level of trust that they know what they're going to get from me every time.
I really like that, because I think as young people start their professional lives, they sometimes get into environments or campus culture or corporate culture, and they don't really know how to navigate that, and they don't know the values of the leadership and how that all flows down. So
yeah, I think it's really critical, especially from the leadership team. And I think, you know, they hear that from us quite often, what they're going to get from us and what that situation, whatever that situation is. So there's no surprises.
Right. There's no like, well, nobody told me. It's like, well, no, this is the value system we have here.
Yeah. No, this is what they told me. And no, oh, I thought she was going to say this because I've heard her say that in other situations. And now she's saying this other thing.
Yeah.
We don't appreciate that. I know I don't. That confusion in the message.
Right.
And I think it's important when you're in a leadership role, to be that authentic self. And so that way you are truly reflecting who you are, so that exactly everyone knows what they're going to get from you. So everybody who works in my shop could tell you exactly that family is number one, because I tell them the same thing. You have to put your family first, because if you don't, you're not going to be 100% when you're here. And so go take care of what you need to take care of, so that you can come back and be 100% you in your work. So I think that living that values and showing others what those values are is a true sign of being a true leader, you authentically being there for your staff.
And I think too that, you know, everyone's busy in these work environments, and if you do that, I think you get into a situation where I don't have to ask you a certain question, because I know you and I know what you're going to say in this situation.
Exactly.
I know how you're going to respond. Because you've let me know those values.
Right.
So Dr. Torres, same question to you.
Ditto.
No dittos here. Your sense of identity and how you've navigated your professional career and how it develops in that sense.
Well, I mean, literally, I want to echo what my colleagues said about value systems. I think that they're spot on. I'll just add, you know, I think for me, and everyone's got a different story, something that I think will relate to all of you in the audience is, you know, my mother immigrated from Cuba as a child when she was 11. She did not know any English. She came, at the time Fidel Castro was, in charge of Cuba, and it was very traumatic for her and for the family to just leave everything and come to the United States. But of course, the United States provided a promise for new opportunities that they did not have in Cuba. And I say that because that is really core to my belief in the power of education and the fact that our family prioritized education as being paramount in, what we all needed to do. So I remember hearing growing up as a child, your job is to study and to do well in school. That's your job. And we're not going to make you work unless you want to. I got a job in high school working at McDonald's for all 4 years, but the only reason I did that initially was to help my sister have a clubhouse party that she wanted to have in 6th grade that my parents said they wouldn't pay for. So, it was, I decided, okay, well, if I want to provide her with that opportunity, then I've got to go out and get a job. And I did, but I never at the expense of my education. And I think that that's a value system that, because my ancestors had to work so hard coming into this country and had to start from scratch and work their way up. And I'm very proud of them. My mother, who just retired recently, ended up, becoming this is in Texas. So back in the day in the 80s and 90s, they had bilingual teachers. So she could teach English and Spanish in class, regular classroom teacher, became a counselor, became an assistant principal, and eventually a principal. And so watching that and trying to emulate that work and then, trying to set my own path for myself. I mean, that was just very important to me. And so, like my colleagues, I believe in the power of education. And I think it's important for us to invest our energies into what we do to educate not only each other, but ourselves as well.
Yeah, and I think I didn't know that about you, and I think that's such a great illustration. We talk a lot about open access. We talk about the value of education as educators, as if it's self-evident, as if it's just the air we breathe. I think that's a really good example of the real tangible standards of living are raised by this process, by this journey.
Very much.
And I think we often forget that these are the real benefits and the real rewards, not just learning, but what it can do to transform lives and then the lives of your children. It's multi-generational. That's really powerful. Thank you for that. A little detour here because in terms of my next question, I was listening to what you were saying, and I was thinking about mentorship. And I was wondering, I again, going back to my own journey here, I didn't have a real mentor in my teens and 20s. That just wasn't, single mom and things like that. And so mentorship was elusive to me. And I wonder, have you had mentors? I'll start with you. Are there mentors in your life? Are there ways that a young person that feels like they need that connection? Is there something they can do? Do you have any thoughts on that role?
Yeah. I think mentorship is huge. It is huge. And I think that I was the same as you. I didn't really have a mentor in high school or, I had people I kind of talked to, but not in a mentorship style relationship until I got here into my career. Once I really got into my career, I started seeing the people who had the jobs I wanted. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go talk to that person. I want to find out more about their journey. What did they do to get there? What kind of education did they have? What did they do to prepare themselves? And so I found that here, but I sought it out because I think that if you sit back and wait for somebody to start mentoring you, you're never going to get one. And so you really have to look to see, gosh, that person has something I want. I need to hone my skills to what that person has, or I need to learn how they figured that out. And so that's what I did is I found people here. I thought I know that it was instrumental in my career. So when I was an admin assistant, I was working for the director of admissions and records, and she, I thought, had so much in her head that I needed to learn, that I needed to understand. So I would sit with her and talk to her about how she got there. How did she get that information? And then I would go do that so that I could learn that same information. And then we became almost partners in the work that we were doing. So that then I could apply for that job when it became open, and I could go and become that candidate who would have the skill set to be able to do that. So that's what I've done throughout my career, and finding that whether it's, working in the office next door to me or at the statewide level, I know that there's a person out there who's just great at their job that I want to learn from, and I'll reach out to them. But I went and sought those out.
So your advice is to be assertive here.
You go find somebody who already has what you want and go learn from them. Go find out how they got it. And that person will feel honored. I have to tell you, when people come to you and they say, "Can I mentor with you?" You're like, "Heck yes, you can. Oh my God.
I got all of this.
Yeah, I have something you want. Please come."
And did you use that magic
Yes,
word?
100%.
Yeah. So
It's going there saying, "I want to learn from you. You have so much knowledge. I want to learn from you." And that person becomes so honored that they're like, "Yes, let me impart this on you," because they had it hard going to figure all that out. So they want to be able to help you. But then you have to pass that along too. Once you have that information,
Right.
then you have to mentor
That's the
them
life cycle.
and pay it forward and get to that next cruise so that you can. I always say, when I go to retire, I want it to just be like, they don't even need me anymore, because so many people have trained and figured out how to do my job that they could just go by and I could walk away and they'd be just fine. Like that is a true, to me, a success in your role, to be able to walk away and they take over just fine because they have all the information they need to succeed.
Yeah, I think that's a real legacy.
Right. And so that's my hope in 9 years and 14 days. But that way, when you go to retire, you can leave with something better than what you had come in with.
Yeah.
I turn to you, mentorship. What does it mean to you? What did that develop on its own to you, or did you seek it out, or what are your thoughts?
It did in kind of in ways I wasn't expecting. As a young person, I always really admired my parents for what they were able to do with the little that they had. Both my parents were high school graduates only, and they made really good careers for themselves with just their high school education. But right around the time I was in junior high school, my mom decided she wanted to go back to school, and she wanted to get her bachelor's degree and her teaching credential. And so her and I ended up in our bachelor's programs at the same time. So she was actually had part of her time here at the USEN through the Cal State Bakersfield program, and while I was at San Diego State. And so her and I kind of became buddies in that way, where it was a different relationship. We were doing this together at that point, sharing knowledge. We were in two different schools of how to navigate college life. And I thought that was really valuable to be able to have somebody to be able to, like, what are you doing and how are you getting your classes? And so we actually have pictures from our graduation of both of us in our caps and gowns from when we both graduated with our bachelor's degree, which was a lot of fun. I was really proud of her for that, for doing something, because for me, that was always the goal. Sort of like with your family, I was always told, this is what you do. Yep. You go to school, you're going to go to college, you're going to go and you're going to do these things. But for them, that was unheard of for my mother to even think about doing that until the time she did. And then once I became, in my professional career, I had, very challenging but amazing bosses. They were very challenging people through the Cal State system, up until I came here, where they were very challenging people to work with, but they had so much knowledge that you could tell they wanted to give, and I was there and I wanted to learn, and their jobs seemed so cool that I was like, well, how do you do that? How do I do that? And that was how I fell into being trained as a paralegal, was just like, well, what does that even mean? How do you do that? And what is it, what do you have to do to get there? You have to serve a lot of process, which is scary. But I did that. And that was a really rewarding experience. And she was telling me the things I needed to do if I wanted to get where she was. You have to go through these steps and take this and become part of this class or become part of this organization. And I think part of it, not only being assertive in finding it, but in listening when people want to give you information. And to not just think like, oh, it's just another person trying to tell me what I should be doing, like they have some kind of control over my life, but instead seeing it for what it is, which is, those are gifts. You may not use them. Yeah. You may not use them at all, but you might. to be able to fall back in it and go, oh, they told me this thing and this is paying off right here. To be able to pursue whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish next. So being open to it and listening when people want to give you advice, I think is critical.
And it seems like as I listen to this, I think you're also saying or implying, I think that you have to muster the courage to ask a lot of questions.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And to sort of be
Yes.
vulnerable in the sense that when you do that, you're sort of admitting there's a lot I don't know here.
Right.
There's plenty I can learn here, but I think that's a really good lesson. One other thing about your comments too, it sounds to me like you sort of carved in, so your mom's not your peer, that's your
Right.
mom,
Yes.
but it sounds to me like you sort of carved out a peer-to-peer mentorship program,
Yeah.
so to speak, and it makes me realize that maybe students might take that lesson as a
Mhm.
way of, connecting with my friend.
Oh, yeah.
We both want these things. What do you want to do with your life? What do I want to do? And
Yeah.
maybe I don't have an older mentor, but I got a friend maybe that we can have that more formal relationship where we're doing fun stuff, but then we kind of get serious and talk about that kind of stuff. Sounds like that's kind of what you did.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it was, we were able to do those things together. And I did have friends once I was going to school and, we had like-minded kind of goals, that we didn't feel like we were done. We knew we had other things that we wanted to accomplish, either professionally or in college. And that we were able to bounce those ideas off of each other. Or if it was like, oh, did you realize that you could go get counseling? Oh, I didn't know that. And to be able to follow the information that they were getting. And I wasn't necessarily the type of person that would go looking for some of that information. I was kind of you do it on your own. That was kind of what the model that I grew up with was, you just do it on your own. And so it really took having people say, well, you don't have to. You could go get, peer advising, or you could go get someone else to help you on your journey. You don't have to do it all by yourself. And I think my mom ended up becoming the bigger example of that. She did something that for her was extremely scary. Not really knowing that was an option to then having it become an option and not knowing where to start, that I felt like I could be a mentor to her and say like, well, this is what I'm doing. Let me try and help you do that too. And so it was sort of a peer-to-peer mentorship that became a really cool experience.
And it sounds like you're learning the steps that led you to be mentors now at this point.
Yes.
Others.
Yeah.
So,
One
thanks.
of the things I wanted to jump on that you had said, and it came from your story, is it's really okay to not know.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially when you're early on in your career, you're a student, you're trying to learn. It's okay to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about this, because I think a lot of people are so scared to say, I don't know, like as if it's going to be a fault. And it's not. It's, oh, good. I'm so glad you said that, because as your boss, I've been trying to tell you, you don't know that.
I read this email.
Right. It's okay to not know. I haven't taught you that yet.
Right.
You haven't been in this experience yet. So it's okay to admit you don't know.
And it's the step to learning. It's
That's exactly it. And I think a lot of people get so tied up and so scared to say, I don't know. And it's okay to not know.
Yeah.
No one expects you to know everything out of the gate.
And I would say, I love that. And I would say, if I'm in an environment where I feel like it's not okay to not know, then I might want to rethink the environment.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Good point.
Find that mentor and talk
Yep.
to them.
I'll turn this to you. You've been
Well,
a mentor. I would imagine you've had
mentorship. I mean, it is absolutely critical. And, a little bit of my story, when I was an undergraduate happened to be at a university, my undergraduate chemistry advisor, Dr. John Hogg, may he rest in peace. That man was phenomenal, because we were at a major research university, but he did not want to do research. He wanted to work with students. He wanted to be the undergraduate advisor. He wanted to be the faculty champion for the chemistry club, which I was a part of. And I know it sounds, whatever, but I enjoyed it. I was a part of it. And he really inspired me, because I realized that it's okay to be passionate about teaching and about working with students. And just because you don't want to do research, because that was the environment that we were in at the time. And it really was inspirational for me. And I say that because you realize very quickly what it is that you're truly interested in. And when you have a mentor telling you that it's okay if you want to do it a certain way, and your way happens to be different than the status quo, that's okay. Why not? Why not do it? Why not be different? Why not be unique? And sometimes I think that, and maybe I just speak for myself, but I think that growing up, I sometimes felt like I had to do it a certain way. You know, when I was growing up, I was told you're going to go to medical school. No, I didn't go to medical school. I had no interest in going to medical school. The moment I saw blood in college, I was like, I'm out. I mean, I don't want to deal with that. And I was more interested in doing chemistry and more interested in that aspect of it. And then when I got to graduate school, I was more interested. The reason I got my master's in chemistry and not my doctorate, I got sick of working in the lab. I couldn't take one more day in the lab. I mean, you might as well have pulled the trigger. I was done. But I had no problem being in a lecture hall, working with students, serving as a TA, being an instructor, having a part-time assignment, working at a community college. That's where I found my passion. And I believe that I was able to realize all of that because of my mentor. If it hadn't been for the example that my mentor set for me, I don't even know that I would have gone down the path that I have today. He was an excellent administrator. He was student-centered. He enjoyed teaching. And ironically, those are the same three qualities that I share. And so that to me really provided that framework that I needed and the courage that I needed to pursue the path that I felt would be best for me. And so again, mentorship, it is so critical. And as Jasmine alluded to earlier, you know, when you're finally in the position where you're able to mentor someone else, please pay it forward.
Okay.
Because you've been given that gift and the grace and the time that somebody invested in you. It is then eventually your turn to reinvest that time and that energy and those gifts with the next generation.
And it sounds like you're not saying, you know, be a shoulder to cry on or throw out bits of wisdom. I think you're all saying, you know, formalize this,
Yeah.
make this a real relationship and state that and put it out there.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, that's fantastic. What are some advices? What is some advice? What are pieces of advice that you would give to young people who, many of whom are starting their professional journey? So what are some pieces of wisdom you would share?
Do you want to start on this one?
I actually do. Thank you. I appreciate you.
I saw your notes.
You felt that. You know,
Good.
you've got to be willing, I think, to take risks and not be afraid of failing. And I'd like you to reflect on that for just a moment, because I will put myself out there. I took a risk. I call it my professional development excursion back in 2014, 2015, where I decided to leave College of the Canyons for about 8 or 9 months. And I took a vice presidency job at another college. And it's not that it was a bad college, it's not that it was horrible students. It just wasn't a good fit for me. But I was lucky because, you know, luckily they hadn't filled my position here, HR, and I was able to come back and I was able to resume those duties and then take on additional responsibilities. And it was a learning experience for me, so that when I eventually did reapply to become an associate vice president, eventually a vice president of instruction, it was the right fit for me. And so I look back at my experiences in 2014, 2015, no regrets. I absolutely enjoyed everything that I did. And even though it didn't work out in the way that I envisioned it was going to work out, that was okay.
Mhm.
It was a strategic risk. Some looking on the outside may say I failed because I ended up having to leave. I left my job, you know, out of my own choice. No, I didn't see it as a failure. I saw it as I learned something more about myself, wasn't a good fit. I was able to get out. I was able to return, and it still worked out years later. So that's my one piece of advice is strategic risks. It's okay to make mistakes. We're human.
Yeah.
You know, you're never going to perfectly do everything. That's all right.
And so you say strategic, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
I just have a quick question. So if you take a risk and it doesn't work out, what would be your advice for us to do? Like, say if okay, like you said, you went to a job and the job, correct? So what if we try to do the other job, but it doesn't work out in that job? What would you recommend someone to do at that point?
Yeah. Well, I think it varies. Circumstances vary, right? So, I mean, every situation is going to be unique. So, it's hard for me to generalize, but I will say this. I think that it's very important for people, for all of us, myself included, do your homework ahead of time, but recognize that there's always the human factor that you may or may not actualize or realize in the moment until you get there. And then once you get there, if it's, oh my gosh, this is not what I thought it was going to be, well, don't just turn your back on it immediately. Sometimes things take time to, develop organically and to foster those relationships. When you're going into any new situation, the one thing that I think you want to avoid doing is trying to make change immediately. You really have to take the time to build trust, build rapport, get to know the people, learn the culture, and then start engaging in that back and forth organic dialogue about, well, what can we do, appreciative inquiry, to continue to capitalize upon the amazing things that we're doing in whatever the setting is, higher ed, whatever. But if you, after the course of that due time and due diligence, if you realize, this is not what I signed up for, that's okay. Then you're able to have that, self-realization. You're able to reach out to mentors and to colleagues whom you've connected with, whether it was in a prior job or perhaps people whom you have, relationships with, professionally, and say, okay, where might there be other opportunities for me? But don't just give up. And don't just assume that you're going to be stuck in that rut for the rest of your life, because you have opportunities. You have to explore those opportunities. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. If they don't, you learn something from there. You bring that with you to the next opportunity.
I would add to that too. I mean, sometimes failure is an opportunity to refocus. There may be reasons for the way that, how something fell apart. And it gives you an opportunity to refocus on maybe what you want to do, or maybe something that you should be doing, and you haven't put as much time and effort in developing that part of your professional, kind of repertoire, and this is going to give you that opportunity to do that. But there's something that you said, Omar, about like culture. And I think that's huge when it comes to your professional success. Not every job is going to fit you. And as much as, you interview for a position and they're interviewing you, and then you get there, you're interviewing that place and you're getting to that place, and then you're testing it out to see if it's going to work for you. Does it align with what you're passionate about? Does it align with what you value, whatever your code of ethics is? And do those things align? And to have that kind of self-aware moment where you go, no, it does not. And I had that moment too. I had worked in the Cal State system for 10 years. I was at Cal State Channel Islands. I was the director of their faculty personnel program, and I absolutely hated it. I hated driving out there. I hated being out there. It was very isolated. There was definitely an institutional culture of, we do this way, and we've done it that way for 50 years. And I didn't like that. It didn't give you any room to grow. And I felt stuck. And I realized that what I had to do in order to move forward was to take a step back. I had applied for a position here at the college. I was in an administrative position there. I took a step back to be a staff member at College of the Canyons and worked my way back from that moment, because I needed to find a place where I felt like I could be my authentic self, and it was not there. And then to be able to come here and realize that I could flourish here. And so sometimes I think about that and I think, okay, that was a failure. I gave up. I decided that I did not want to be there anymore. And that could be construed a failure, but in really, it was an opportunity for me to refocus on what was really important to me. One was being able to do the work the way I thought it should be done, but be able to do it in an environment that I felt the most comfortable in. And it was an added bonus that it was closer to home, which I was trying to get to anyway. And I was tired of commuting. But I think that part of it's that too. It's that failure is an opportunity. And if you look at it that way, I think it takes the sting out of it a little bit. That it's, not always the negative connotation that we think of failure.
But it sounds like, as I hear both of you, that a necessary ingredient in that process of you have a stumble in life, a professional stumble. It sounds to me like you both took some time to really reflect on what went right, what went wrong. You didn't just say, well, moving on, and dust yourself off. You took a more cohesive, a real sense of trying to figure this out.
That's right.
Yeah. Map out what went wrong. Yeah. Okay.
It was interesting too, because it was actually in coming to COC, I had like a double mistake, I will say. Because I had actually applied for a position here a year prior and turned it down. I'd applied for a job here in human resources. Omar sat on my hiring committee. And I had turned it down. They had offered me the job and I was like, no, I don't want to take a step back to do this. I'm just going to stick it out. And I was going to stay at Channel Islands in the director's job. And because that was like, from a status perspective, I was moving forward. That was moving up, so to speak. But then, fast forward a year later, and I was like, I don't feel any better about this than I did a year ago. And so I applied for the same job again. It just so happened that the job came open again. And I was like, I made a mistake a year ago. The dumb thing was to stay, and I did it. And now I need to refocus and decide that taking the step back was the right thing to do. So it doesn't always come right away either, that.
This is not a linear
It's
path.
not.
No.
We're going,
Yeah, and it took a year for me to realize that my first inclination was the right one. And that, but not to make a knee-jerk move. I was like, I'm gonna stick it out and see how this goes. And to feel the exact same way a year later, and then by whatever grace of the universe, that the job was open again. And I was like, yes, I'm going to do this. And to have, the person that offered me the job say, well, we already did this once. Are you sure you're going to take it? I was like, yeah, this time. Yes. Yeah. This time for sure.
It also sounds like you have to set aside your ego a little bit. And you have to-
Absolutely.
and you have to ignore how you're going to be perceived.
Yes.
That's right.
It's
by
huge.
peers and family and friends.
I think that's huge. And I know for you too, I mean, coming back from Santa Ana, there's a lot of stigma attached with your career path, right?
Okay.
When it isn't linear, or when you move from one career to the next, or, you decide after emptying years of doing something and you're going to do something completely different. And we hear those stories all the time, where they were, judges or whatever. And then they're like, no, I want to start a preschool, and there's a lot of stigma attached to doing that. And like, well, how could you give all that up to do it? But I think part of it is putting your ego aside and realizing that all that's just noise. What matters is, are you happy? Are you being true to yourself? And are you doing something that you're going to be able to do until retirement and feel good about? And that to me is more than, means more than the stigma attached to doing it.
I don't think you can succeed very much in a position where you're unhappy.
No, not at all.
I think I asked about advice and I got some really great
Yes.
responses that I don't even know if they're about advice, but they're more about,
They're
they're
great.
great. They're great. So do you have any advice for people navigating this process?
Pick what you love.
Yeah.
You're gonna be working with the vast majority of your life, you'll be working, and you're not gonna be with your family. You're gonna be choosing to spend your time somewhere else in order to be able to sustain what you want to do outside of work.
Right.
And that's why we all work, right?
Mhm.
We work because we need the money in order to eat, in order to have a home, in order to be able to provide for people. So pick what you love. And if you don't know what you love, walk through a door and find out if that's the door you love. And if it's not, turn around and find something else. When I used to teach our college career class, it was, okay, for the next 60 years of your life, you're going to be doing something in work. So you might as well like it. And if you don't like it, just like you heard from them, get out.
Yeah.
Don't feel like you have to do it because society has put these norms on us, or society says this is what we have to be doing. It's not worth it. Just do what you love, because it's going to be stressful. It's going to be hard work. You're going to have to give a lot of your own personal time to be able to do it. But if you don't like the work you're doing, then why are you there? Pick up and move to something else. It's just not worth having to sit and do something you don't want to do. And I think the three of us, if you haven't noticed, we get bored pretty easily. And so if you make us do the same thing every day, all day, we find something else to do. And so that's where we're chasing our passions. That's where we're chasing, what is it that makes me happy that I'm going to go do it? I mean, Ryan, I didn't even know you were going into a history program. I want to join you because it's like, I need something to excite me and to really stir my brain. I can't just sit and be rote all the time. And so find something you're passionate about. And if you really like it, do it. It doesn't matter how much money it is. It doesn't matter how many hours it is. It doesn't matter any of that. Just find something you love. Find something you really like doing.
Yeah.
That's my advice.
I love that. And I think that's so true in life. If you follow that passion, often the
Yeah.
career and work and money things kind of fall
Come
into
with
place.
it. They
They
do.
do.
They come together.
Pursue it that way.
Yeah.
I want to shift gears. We have a little bit of time left and I want to hear from our audience. And I hope they have I know they have some comments and questions, but I want to ask a couple of other questions real quickly. And then we'll turn it over to our attendees. These are more about where the college is headed in terms of its relationship to our students. And one of the questions is, and I think you can all respond to this, but I think we'll start with you, Dr. Medlin, because of your background in human resources. Well, not just what is the college looking for when we look to hire people, but what are employees, because you're all kind of connected to the workforce and to the community and what employers in this valley and in LA. What are employers looking for? What are the characteristics? And I'll say this because I remember like 7 or 8 years ago, I have little kids and I remember their teacher said, well, they need to code. Everyone needs
Yes,
to code.
everybody needs to code.
Gotta code. And I still not sure what that means. But and I don't know that that's actually the future. Maybe it is. I don't know.
In some
In
respects,
some
maybe.
respects, it probably
Yeah.
is. But what skills, what tangible skills are employers looking for now? And what do you think they're gonna be looking for in the next few years?
So I think, as far as tangible skills go, one of the things that employers have always looked for, and I think will continue to look for, is communication skills. Maybe now that's more important than ever because there's so many varieties of how people communicate with each other, and especially with how employers are communicating with whoever they service, whatever the business might be. There's so many ways of doing that. If it's through email, if it's through text, if it's through Facebook, or, whatever the social media, the new thing is, that communication skill is really key to be able to communicate what the company is about, what your position does, and who you are serving. Communication skills are huge. Other things are whatever the technical aspects of that job are. A lot of the work that we do at the college, even if it's not a computer job, requires a computer. And so to be able to be proficient in those skills, whether it is, in word processing softwares, Microsoft Word, if it's Excel, even in jobs where you wouldn't think we use spreadsheets, we do. And so I think to have at least a basic knowledge of all of those Microsoft suite kind of, how to put together a presentation, how to put together a document or a memo. Those skills, those hard skills of the technical pieces are really important. Inevitably, you're going to have to, be able to communicate through the written word, or you're going to have to communicate through spreadsheets of balancing a budget. To have those skills is something I think employers are always looking for. And then it's to have belief in whatever the brand is. I think most organizations, us included, are looking for cheerleaders of that place, right? And so that's part of where the intersection of your values and their values kind of comes together, is that employers are really looking for somebody that can be an extension of them out in the world. We talk a lot about branding when we talk about human resources and we talk about marketing, and that's something that employers are really looking for, is how are you going to take us from where we are here to where we're going to be? And I think we look at that at the college in our jobs too, is that one of the things that's really valued at the district is how do you be a leader from where you're at? Regardless of the position that you're in, regardless of where you might be in some hierarchical ladder of jobs, how are you going to lead in the position that you're at and bring something to the environment that can then be of a value to the district or to the position that you're in at the college?
So it sounds like if I were seeking a job in whatever profession, one of the things I'd want to do is do some research and do some homework on where I'm looking to be employed.
Yeah.
And I think that really goes a long way when you're interviewing, is to be able to bring some knowledge that you've done on your own. I'll share with you that in some of the interviews that go south really fast, that I'm a part of, are when people walk in and they misremember something basic, like, it's not College of the Canyons. It's, oh, I'm so happy to be here at Cal State LA. You know, well, no, wrong.
Yeah.
But it shows a carelessness, right? You know, there's a carelessness in that you're not really sure where you are, or you're not really sure what you're doing. And, you know, so if you're interviewing for a position, to know a little bit of something, no one's expecting for a candidate to come in and be like, I know that you've been here since 1968, you know, and to be able to have some long historical perspective, but to be able to say, like, I looked around on your website, you know, for your department. I looked around the student services website and I noticed that you have empowerment programs. I'm really interested in that because I was a foster youth student, or I was, you know, to be able to bring some connection for the employer to go, you get it. You get what we do.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, and will be continually as, you know, we start to see the shifts in employers where the value systems have become a much more important aspect to employment. It's not just get a job and stay there for 40 years, and showing just that you're dedicated to a place, but that you're dedicated to what that place stands for.
Yeah. And where it's going.
And where it's going.
Yeah. That's great. Dr. Ruys, what are skills you think that employers are looking for, not just here, but
Yeah.
across the valley?
Well, I'll talk about in student services first, and then I'll push that out. So in student services, one of the things that we're always looking for is someone who, one, has that understanding that education is first. With that is our business. This is what we do, is education. So if you're not bought into that, it doesn't make any sense for you to do any of the work within student services. And also that you want to serve students, that you are putting students first. Students are the ones who are going to be your main customer. So when I say those two things, when you start pushing that out, it's, are you buying into what we're selling? We're selling education. Are you buying into that? So when you go to that company and you want to work for that company, I'm hoping that you're buying into whatever their mission is, whatever they want to do. So if you decide you want to go work for an oil company, it means because you really believe in oil, you know? So is that your value system? Is that what you want to be doing? I also think if you have to have that basis of technology, having that, the Microsoft Word or the Google Sheets, whatever it is, whichever platform it is, that you have an understanding of that, because honestly, none of us want to take our time to teach you Excel. None of us want to take our time to teach you how to use your email. At that point, you should be walking in with those base level skills, because there are so many places to get yourself trained on that. YouTube videos teach it to you right there. It's not that it's part of an education that you need to go get. That's just something now that is part of the workforce. So if you don't have that, get it, because it is so easy to get. It's not that you need to be certified in it. You don't need any of that. Just use it. Because I do have to say, the people who know it and understand it, they take off and they excel in their jobs, and they do a really good job, because they don't need to take the time to learn that, because we could teach them other stuff and get them going in the other things. So I think that's huge. And I think that it's so cliche, working in teams, because you work with people. You're gonna have to work with people. And can you work with people? Can you get along with and be able to move a mission together? Is really important. So all of those class assignments that everyone does, where you have the team and I'm always on the team that no one does anything, and then I stand up and do it. Guess what? I'm still standing up and doing it. You know, I'm still working with the team that might not be able to get me everything I need, but I'm going to stand up and do it. It teaches you what you need to do in the workplace. So be good team members all the way around, because if you have a good team, you're stronger together. You'll get that. It's much more efficient. So those are my.
Yeah, and on the technology piece, I totally agree on all that, but especially on the technology, I don't think there's an interview happening in this country right now where there isn't a question.
Agreed.
It's true.
About that.
Agreed.
About how you utilize technology.
How do you
Yeah.
utilize technology?
I
I think those two things, utilizing technology and those soft skills.
Yes.
You know, how do you interact with others? How do you integrate technology into what you do? And how do you interact with others is huge, because a lot of it is people oriented, regardless of the type of job that you're getting. And are you going to be able to come in and work with people?
Yeah, because you're asking people to be tech savvy and people savvy at the same time.
At the same time,
Yeah.
which sometimes can seem
Yeah.
mutually exclusive.
Right.
But
And
they
when it's
they
coming
are.
along, and they go together really nicely when it's working. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to turn it over to our audience, but I want to hear from you. What are
I'll be
employers
quick.
looking
Everything they've said, I absolutely agree with. And in fact, those were going to be my answers. So because of that, I'm going to give you two additional responses.
Great.
one of the things is, I think if I'm an employer looking to bring on some new talent into the workforce, I'm looking for somebody that has creative ideas. Someone that just doesn't need to be told what to do, but is willing to think outside of the box and is able to create new opportunities, for the workforce, for the job, whatever it is that you're doing. I think that that's important. And so when an employer may ask you, and you may think, where the heck did this question come from? Can you tell me about a situation where you came up with an idea that was innovative?
You're sharing our questions.
I mean, you
That
really
is
need
one
to
of our
think
standard
about that. When you're applying for a certain job,
Yeah.
and you're thinking about, immersing yourself in that company's culture, you want to present a side of yourself that they may not ordinarily be able to read, strictly speaking, from your cover letter or from your CV or resume. And so you need to be able to think about, do you have a response to that question? What have you done that's innovative? Another one is, sometimes companies may ask, where do you see yourself in the next, 2 to 3, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Well, let's be clear. Their hope is that you're still going to be at the company. I mean, I would imagine certainly that'd be my hope. I don't want to invest dollars in training you only to have you go and leave in 6 months or 12 months.
Yeah.
Gen Z, just say it. You're trying to commit to your employer, but you also have opportunities to grow within that framework of employment. So those are things, in addition to everything else that my colleagues stated, which I 100% concur with. And I was thinking, what else could I tell you? But these are probably 2 other considerations that I think are important for you to think about as well.
That's great. Yeah, thanks. Thank you all. Those were great comments and thoughts there. I want to turn over to you. Are there questions from our audience or questions on the stream, or anybody have any questions? Yeah, please.
It's just a quick question. This was I understand that part of just like going to an area or trying an opportunity that like goes for you. What about opportunities that when you're in a position, you're doing very well, but you kind of have a feel that you do want to like move on from that and advance, but like you're doing so well in one area, but like this, you don't really see like that. You have a good team around your environment.
Right.
But you know that
Kind of feel like you topped out.
Yeah, it's like having that good environment, having that nice position.
Right.
You know that you want more. Would give me that question. I mean, advice for like trying to do another position.
I think it's an asking.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's an asking, and I knowing these 2 very well, and myself included, we do kind of get bored easily, and I think it's because we like what we do, we're really good at what we do, but if we only did that, we would be topped out. There's no more room for growth, right? If we only just did what was expected of us, what's written in our job descriptions, that would be it. And so I think it's an asking and seeing if there's other opportunities with the organization, especially if you really value and like the organization, you like your colleagues, it's a good place to be, but you're capable of a little bit more, or you're capable of trying something else. It's in asking if there's opportunities to do that.
Yeah.
Some places are really great about offering job shadowing programs, where you can ask your boss and say, hey, I know I'm doing really good at this, but I really like what this person does over here. Would it be okay if I spent some time with them and see if that's something that I'm interested in? Most employers are okay with it because you're still kind of keeping it in the family. You're not saying I'm going to leave. I'm that invested here, but I want to see maybe where there's some opportunities for me to grow, because where I'm at right now means there's nowhere else for me to go above this.
And I'll add to that, and I'll use myself as an example. So without saying too much, I was starting to feel pretty comfortable with my job, but then I realized that there's more that I can do within the framework of the job outside of just the walls of the college. And so I challenged myself about 1.5 years ago to start striving to become more involved at the statewide level. And so, being a leader now, I'm the president-elect of my organization, and I'll be the president next year statewide for all the VPs of instruction. And that's 116 California community colleges. So it's a lot of work, and we don't get, release time from our regular duties. We've got to get all that job done. And on top of that, you're also leading the state. There are opportunities there where, depending on what field you're in, you might find a way to involve and engage yourself in activities that are related to what you do, but are outside the halls or the walls of where you're currently working as a means to give back even more, or to lead in other innovative ways that perhaps you hadn't necessarily done at up to that point, and therefore challenging yourself. So that's another thing that you may want to think about, because you may have a great gig going on at where you're employed, and you've got a great team, and you're mentoring, and you're being mentored, and you're creating space for the next generation to start learning some of the things that you do, so that when you do retire in 9 years and 4 days, that the next group is ready to come up. But in addition to that, you're still challenging yourself at a larger level
Yeah.
to start doing other things that are more systems oriented. So
Yeah.
I would encourage you to think about that as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I have a question. Interviews could be intimidating. What advice or tips can you provide us with an interview?
Well, one of the things I over prepare for interviews. So I go in with, as I'm applying for the job, look through that job description. What is it that they want you to be doing?
Mhm.
Craft questions that they're going to ask you to find out if you've done it or how you know about it, what kind of information you have. I literally get a notebook out and I start what questions would I ask a candidate for this? What questions would be posed to me? Google, what questions are asked about this technical position or whatever it is. And then I answer them, and I go through my notebook and I answer all of these questions. I go through, like, what do I have in my experience that is budget related? What in my experience do I have that is program related, that is about this project? And so that I go through and I answer all those questions, so that when I'm walking into that interview, I feel like I've already answered anything you could ask me, because you're probably only going to ask me 10 or 15 questions. I've asked myself 90 to prepare for this thing. And I've filled up books with this because I wanted to make sure I'm prepared. Because the worst thing is that fear that it gets inside of you when you walk into that room and you see, well, here we have 9 people sitting around a table, 15 people sitting around a table to interview you. That's intimidating. That's scary walking into that. But if I already know, like, I know this job, I might not know 100% of this job, but I know 80% of this job. And I can answer what my experience is in regards to this. So when you're going to ask me a question about teamwork, I can already give you examples of teamwork. I can already tell you how it works. I can tell you how I lead a team. I can tell you how I am about being part of a team, how I assign roles. I could go through all of that because I've prepared myself to walk in. So then that way I'm more nervous about just it being over instead of the content of the interview, because I feel like I prepared for that content. So just ask as many questions as you can think of, and prepare. If you know, one of the things that I've told other people is it's going to be a panel of 6 people. Find 6 friends and hand them your
Mock
questions
interviews.
and make
Mock
them
interviews.
make them interview you, so that you can get it down of how you're going to answer it and how you're going to see. I mean, and there are people who will jump in and do that for you because they want to see you succeed. So it's about preparation, and just take the time to do it. Don't go in cold.
And then
Preparation.
If I could just add, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
If I could just add, I think that's such great advice. And I think about my own interview experience on both sides of the table. Make a lot of eye contact.
Yes.
And this is hard when you're nervous, but give the impression that this is the exact room and the exact moment you want to be. Take some joy in this, and genuinely try to enjoy the process, which is really hard because you're nervous. But I when I've been in the interview experience, I consciously go in thinking, I want to give the impression this is where I want to be.
Yes.
I want to be in this room with these people. And it's hard, but I do think about that as I go in. And then all that preparation stuff is essential too. Sorry.
Becomes really important, because I think, to remember that you're the only one that knows what you know.
Right.
And they already picked you at one level, right? You got to the point that you're in the seat to give the interview, that there's already a comfort level with the amount of knowledge you brought to the table. And now it's just in showcasing that knowledge. You're the only one that knows what the answers to the questions that they're going to ask you. Preparation is really key. Giving yourself time is really key, to know that you where you need to be, do your homework. Make sure you show up early so that you can relax and not feel rushed. having the expectation of how many people are going to be there, ask those questions when they're making the phone call to schedule an interview with you. How many people are going to be in the room? Am I going to be able to see the questions ahead of time? Those are questions that you can ask. The answers may be no, or we're not going to tell you, but at least to ask those questions so that you can start to get a mental picture of what it is that you're walking into. And then I think in terms of helping to kind of de-escalate how intimidating it can be, is to remember to be yourself.
Yeah.
Especially when the questions that become uncomfortable. They're looking at potential just as much as they're looking at if you can do the job. They're not expecting that you've already done it. Sometimes they are, but in some cases they're looking for potential, and to be honest about that. If they're asking you a question about your technical skills, are you proficient in Excel? No, but I can be. And to be confident in saying it, no, I don't have exactly that, but I can get it. I think one of the things that makes interviews successful is to feel like you really got a sense of that individual, not just that they think they're great at everything, but that they're real people, and that there's going to be some things that they're not that great at. When you ask that question and it's like, well, what's your weakness? The worst answer is to say, I have none.
Oh.
Really? Are you superhuman?
Yeah.
Everybody has them.
Everybody has them.
To be able to be honest about it and say, I talk too much, or whatever it is, to be very open about what your weakness might be, because they're looking for that. They're looking for the vulnerability in you to be honest about what you are good at and what are they going to need to train you at. Because if you say, I can do everything and I'm amazing, they will expect you to do everything and be amazing. And so if you can't deliver, you've already set yourself up. So I think in that interview process, to just be honest about those questions when you don't really know if you can do it or if you haven't had experience in it, to just be confident that you're going to learn.
I'll be quick. I'm going to take a different response. I have always been a proponent of having a one-pager of just a couple of succinct bullet points that I bring with me into the interview, because you never know if you're going to get nervous, right? You never know if you're going to get nervous. And if you are nervous, which chances are you're going to be, depending on physiologically and chemically how your brain reacts, you might be one of those that freezes in the moment. And then the minute you walk out of the room, you realize, oh God, I wish I had said this, or I wish I had said that. Well, don't put yourself in that situation. Depending on the job, for our jobs, there's going to be a question about human engagement and student engagement and enrollment management and strategic planning and budgeting.
Project management.
Yeah, project management. So you can rest assured that in our little cheat sheets, I'm going to call them, we're going to have some bullet points on 2 or 3 things that you've done. And don't just sit here and talk about your philosophy about, oh, I think project management is so important. I believe in project management, blah. No, you need to give concrete examples, 2 to 3 examples of what you've done that demonstrate that you have the competencies and the skill sets associated with project management. Be succinct. Give examples. You can put in a little bit of philosophy. I say 50-50, 50% philosophy, 50% concrete, 2 to 3 examples, and then you're done. Move on to the next question. Otherwise, you're not going to finish the interview. So that's my first thing.
That's a good one.
And my second thing is
brevity.
For the love of the good Lord, or whatever you believe in. At the very end, many times in final interviews, they may ask you if you have any questions for the committee.
Ask them.
Please ask questions based on the research that you've done. Make sure that they are intelligent questions. I would try to avoid questions like, well, how much money am I going to make as a starting employee? Because guess what? The salary schedules are probably published online. And if you didn't do your homework and if you didn't look that information up, shame on you. You just wasted a question and possibly lost the opportunity to get the job.
That's good.
Simple.
And just to add to that, because you touched on something really good about brevity. Some people, when they're nervous, they tend to go on and on and on. They don't quite know when to stop. Practice in your interviews. Practice having very short to the point answers, because sometimes your interviews are timed, which is what we do at the college. Your interview is timed. You have 50 minutes and you have 15 questions. And if you get to the 50-minute mark and you've only answered 4, you're done. And so there has to be that level of self-management to go like, I'm droning on, okay, wrap it up, let's get to the next question.
Chop, chop.
But to be able to be brief in your answers, and not expound too much on a subject, I think is really important.
I want to touch on how you guys talked about asking questions at the end. Don't just ask questions to ask questions. You should be interviewing them. Is this the place you want to work? Because maybe it's the job you want, but is this the place you want to
Right.
work?
Yeah.
Because this is your opportunity to find out if this is even the culture you want to walk into before you get the job. So I think the types of questions that you're
Yeah.
asking, you should be finding out what is their culture? What is it that they're interested in?
Yeah.
Is there room for growth? And maybe not like, hey, I like this job, but I want the next one. It's, what is your philosophy on professional development at this college or at this
Right.
location, whatever it is. So that way you are finding out, is this the type of place you want to be?
Yes. As long as it's not about money.
Yeah.
Don't ask how many holidays they have off.
Yeah.
And when they say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Don't say in your job.
No.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Mhm.
Even if you want that.
Even if you
Right.
That's your little secret.
at
Yeah.
that moment, you
Yeah.
become competition.
I think I know we probably have more questions, but I want to be very mindful of our time and your time and their time, but please join me in thanking our panelists today. A fantastic discussion. Thank you all so much.
Absolutely.
And thank you for joining us. We hope to see you tomorrow, Thursday, for our upcoming International Forum on Youth. Again, thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Everybody.